Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much on this rainy, kind of damp Thursday in November. Well, maybe better than the alternative, and we know what the alternative is. So we'll just hang tight with the little bit of drizzle, and we'll live through it. The Chambers, my name is Greg DeRocher. I'm President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, Immigration Information for Employers. The Chamber's vision is to inspire change, lead in fostering greatness in our community and economic prosperity, to make Cambridge the most envied city to live, work, play, and of course, build a business. We'd ask that we'd like to encourage you to use the chat box at the bottom for any questions that you have as we move through each presentation. We will have a Q&A after the first presentation, so after the first speaker, and then we will wait to have a further Q&A after the next two speakers, so right at the end of the last presentation. So thanks very much again for joining us. I think everyone on the call, of course, is passionate about this subject and wants to learn more, and we're all trying to understand how we're going to navigate through growth and economic prosperity, and hey, just hiring that next employee that we need so badly. Immigration is going to be the foundation of our economic prosperity and growth. We know that. We've known that for many, many years. I've been involved for over 40 years, and I think we've been talking about the value and the importance of a strategic methodology in immigration to support economic growth and prosperity in our country. We're a nation of immigrants, and we will only see prosperity moving forward if we have a very strategic and robust immigration platform and programs moving forward. So I'm very excited about this program. We're very excited to work with all of our partners in the region of Waterloo. And I want you to, if you're going to be following along, you want to make comments on social media, please use the hashtag CAMBCOC. CAMBCOC. We'd all love to follow along with the conversation, find out what you're thinking and how you're enjoying the presentation. At this time, of course, I want to acknowledge and recognize today's signature partner, Immigration Partnership. They are very important to us. We work closely with them, and they're the foundation of what we know to be successful employment through immigration in the region of Waterloo. And right now, I'd like to invite Nora Whittington on behalf of Immigration Partnership to welcome you.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, everyone. My name is Nora Whittington, and I'm with the Immigration Partnership for Waterloo Region. And just a brief sharing about the Immigration Partnership is that we are about one of 85 immigration partnerships across Canada. And we have existed in Waterloo Region for about 12 years now. And like Greg said, this topic of immigration and it playing a significant role in economic development in our community is so accurate. We have been working very hard in our role as a conduit. And I would say that's what we are, is a conduit to make connections and to gather resources for employers, for immigrant talent and such, with respect to housing, healthcare, English language services, that great sense of belonging that we want everyone to have. And of course, as well, and very, very important, is employment. If you were to ask any of the immigrants, we have the 3 pillars of activity. We have settle, work, and belong within the Immigration Partnership. But if you were to ask any of them, the work pillar, the employment component, is the most critical because it plays into settling and it plays into belonging. So before the Immigration Partnership in Waterloo Region, there used to be the Waterloo Region Immigrant Employment Network, and I was also a part of that team. So we have been working on this in the region for a long time. In fact, the slogan or the campaign at the Waterloo Region Immigrant Employment Network was, "Are you ready? Are you ready, employers, for what is coming?" Because we knew years ago that this was coming. And a lot of people can say that the pandemic has played into this big gap, and sure it has in terms of talent gap. But it existed before the pandemic. I was receiving calls from employers all over the region, really struggling to find people in specific sectors. And as I was saying to Greg earlier, it's just spread to other sectors. And and just broader and bigger. So we are here looking at systems. We take a look closely at systems. We work closely with the chambers, the Workforce Planning Board, local employers, employment services for immigrants, and we look at what's broken, what is great, and how can we enhance it and build upon it to be ready for the number of immigrants that are going to be coming into our community as time passes. So we're always happy for employers and others to reach out to us, to ask questions. We don't have all the answers. I mean, we're all working together as a team in the community to try to resolve this issue. We just know that employers really need to look at the retention of immigrants. Retention is as critical as recruitment. And it's a unique group, but yet they've overcome so many risks to come here, and employers report time and time again the value of hiring immigrants and refugees. So we're just really glad to be a part of this today. We really appreciate your presence and your commitment to hiring immigrants and refugees. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nora, and that's a great partnership. Not to mention that it's part of their name, but it's a great partnership throughout the region of Waterloo, and we certainly appreciate everything that they do to further our economic prosperity through immigration. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, and our first speaker is Dr. Wendy Sukir. She is a diversity founder, academic director of Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and research lead of Future Skills Center. She is a co-author of bestseller Innovation Nation, Canadian Leadership from Java to Jurassic Park, and the former VP of Research and Innovation. Wendy holds a PhD and an MBA and an MA and an honorary doctorates from Laval and Concordia. She actually wanted me to cut her bio down a little bit, because it went on and on and on, but she is an amazing, amazing woman. Wendy Sukir, take it away.
Thanks so much, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I really appreciated the opening remarks that Nora made about the importance of immigration, because we know that the boomers, I'm one, are retiring, and immigrants are really the only way that we're going to meet our labor force needs over the next few years. Also wanted, just building on something that Greg mentioned, wanted to note that I'm joining you from the traditional land of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. And I say that because, in fact, most of us are immigrants to Canada at one point or another. I'm the daughter of a refugee, but we did an analysis recently and found that 50% of Canadians are actually immigrants or children of immigrants. And, if you take it back a few more generations, you'll see even more. So many of us have in our own history that knowledge or that experience of the immigrant journey, and also, I think, our testament to what immigrants contribute to Canada. I wanted to just take some time to cover off a few highlights, and I'm sure a lot of this information is not new to you, but it bears repeating, I think. So I will try the. Can you see my first slide? Greg, you're muted, or somebody. Is my slide up?
Yes, it is.
Oh, thank you so much. Yesterday, I presented for 15 minutes and somebody finally got my attention and said they hadn't heard anything I'd said on another call. So hoping we won't have that issue today. But I wanted to talk a bit about immigration, and with a focus on entrepreneurship and small, medium enterprises, even though we know, of course, there's much more to the story than employment and innovation. And I'll start just a little about the Diversity Institute. So we've been around for a long time. We started with a focus on women in technology, and then moved to look at other dimensions of diversity and inclusion. We do We lead the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, as was mentioned. We lead the Future Skills Research Center, as was mentioned. We also run programs, entrepreneurship training programs, digital skills programs, diversity and inclusion programs with a focus on women, newcomers, racialized people, Indigenous people, and people with disabilities, as well as the LGBTQ2S+ community. And we also are working on a number of very specific projects focused on entrepreneurship, skills in small business, and so on. We're a partner with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, for example, on a project that it has looking at skills specifically in SMEs. So we've been doing quite a lot of work in this area for a while. And one of the things I think that distinguishes us from many other organizations in this space, and it is increasingly crowded space, is that we're in a business school, so that our focus is very much on the business case for diversity. It isn't that we don't subscribe to the idea that this is important from a values perspective or a social justice perspective, but we do believe the evidence shows really clearly that doing a good job of attracting and retaining immigrants is really key to Canada's prosperity, and it's key to the success of organizations, whether they're banks, SMEs, universities, or hospitals, because talent is a critical issue in many organizations. And as Nora mentioned, it was an issue before the pandemic. During the pandemic, of course, with layoffs and so on, priorities perhaps shifted. We've come out of the pandemic with acute labor shortages and skills shortages in many sectors and in many regions, and that's coming out loud and clear in the consultations we're doing with the Ontario Chamber. We also know, however, that as Canadian society changes, it also creates opportunities for new products and services and new expectations in the community. And so again, having a laser focus on issues around diversity and inclusion really helps organizations identify opportunities. Think about the extent to which we now have whole sections of supermarkets devoted to ethnic foods, or the ways in which fashion, health and beauty products, and so on are evolving. If you're in anything that touches on consumers, this becomes critically important. We also know that that doing a good job on diversity and inclusion has a big impact on satisfaction and engagement in communities, in organizations. And we know that organizations that have engaged staff typically have better performance. We know that diversity and inclusion are connected to innovation, creativity, and so on. And it stands to reason, if you have a bunch of people with exactly the same background, they're more likely to think in very similar ways. And finally, there is the issue of risk mitigation, because we've seen examples of organizations that get this wrong, and it can be not only embarrassing, but costly. And we've seen some examples where, decades of building brands have been eroded. Think of what just happened with Hudson's Bay. They announced that they were going to have a BIPOC advisory committee, and they forgot about Indigenous as part of the I in BIPOC. And what was intended to signal that they were committed to diversity and inclusion ended up having exactly the opposite effect. Not going to go into this in detail. I can share the slides for anyone who wants to dig in further. But coming out of the pandemic, BDC says 64% of Canadian businesses say labor shortages are a problem. Wages have gone up 7%. That's a real, for the economists in the room, that's generally a signal that organizations are having more trouble attracting talent because they push wages up in order to attract them. And we see that this is particularly true when it comes to SMEs, having trouble recruiting employers or workers with the skills that they need, finding particular shortages with skilled workers. Costs are rising because they're pushing up wages to attract people. And the focus on skills, this isn't new. I've been working on labor market stuff for almost 30 years. And, you know, technical skills are always in demand, but so are the other skills. We heard a lot in the SMEs we were talking to about the problem with supervisory skills, with management skills. As people are retiring, the newer staff are not necessarily equipped to take over. We talked to one SME in Stony Creek, I think, who said, you know, a couple of years ago, we expected, you know, college graduation, a few years experience, good language skills. Now we'll take anyone who shows up for the interview, because they said 2/3 of people don't even come to the interviews when they're offered an interview. So I recognize that it's different in specific pockets, but we had a consultation in the 519 area, must be 3 years ago now, and a lot of companies were talking about skills shortages, and I think it's probably grown. As I said, one of the things that is happening is demographics are changing dramatically. Immigration is the only way we can offset demographic decline. A lot of people say technology will do it. We'll just move to robots and so on. And they forget that Canada's economy is structured very, very differently than, say, the US. In the US, 50% of private sector employment is large companies. Large companies, it's not that small companies can't automate, can't use technology, but large companies are more likely to have the economies of scale to introduce robots on a massive level or automate processes. SMEs, not so much. And Canada, and if you look at private sector employment in Canada, it's almost 90% companies under 500 employees. And a lot of those companies are under 100 employees, and you just can't get what would be needed to replace labor. There's some going on, but it's not going to offset the shifts in demographics. And that's why immigration is so absolutely critical. And as I mentioned, as markets are shifting, immigrants and other diverse people now have a lot more influence on purchasing decisions. And so thinking about what that means becomes very important if you're in any kind of sector that works directly with people, whether you're government or a bank or a university. We have to be thinking about these things. And as I said, there are also links to innovation. The other thing that for me is really interesting, because we do a lot of work focused on entrepreneurship specifically. And as I said, SMEs are the engine that drive the Canadian economy. Immigrants are far more likely to be entrepreneurs than people born in Canada. Some of it is push. You know, they're maybe excluded from employment opportunities, so they go into self-employment. But a lot of it is pull. A lot of it is the fact that refugees and immigrants who come to Canada, think about it, they have an entrepreneurial spirit. They've given up whatever they had in their home country to come and start afresh. That kind of appetite for risk and tolerance of uncertainty are absolutely core values when it comes to being a successful entrepreneur. Immigrants also tend to be more involved in international trade. Makes sense, right? They often have knowledge of other markets and languages. And the other thing that's important to note, and this is something we're pushing hard on settlement agencies to recognize, is a lot of immigrants who enter self-employment do it out of choice. You know, we did a lot of work with Syrian refugees, and the typical model is you come to Canada, we put you in class to learn English for 6 months, then maybe you get a survival job and you know, off you go. We had Syrians who spoke 7 words of English and they wanted to work, and they wanted to work now. And so we've experimented with models, for example, where you put people to work with wraparound support so they can learn English as they go along. And the evidence is it works almost as well as sitting in a classroom for 8 months, but more importantly, it builds people's sense of self-worth and satisfaction. The Windsor Chamber of Commerce has actually set up a platform that's very similar to TaskRabbit, targeting newcomers in the Windsor area to give them a chance to make money, to gain connections, to develop knowledge of how the Canadian workplace operates by posting, you know, temporary jobs. They're not good jobs. They're not long-term solution to employment. But I think we have to really consider the mental health impact, especially on men who are excluded from the labor market. And I would argue that for many, being able to work quickly becomes very important. The challenges we know are significant, though. We know that, for example, when it comes to issues around feeling included in the workplace, visible minorities have very different experiences than those who are not racialized. And this is oldish data, but remember that the vast majority of immigrants to Canada now are also racialized. So the experience of being excluded in the workplace affects a lot of newcomers. They may be new to Canada, but they may also be experiencing barriers because of the color of their skin. And look at the bottom. The requirement to participate in this very, very large survey was you had to be in Canada for at least 10 years. So these were not newcomers. In my organization, people tend to recommend people of their own ethnicity for high visibility assignments. 9% of white men think that's true, compared to 33% of racialized men. So that gives you some sense of what people are experiencing in some workplaces. The other thing that's important to note is the experience of immigrants is very different if they're Black than if they're South Asian, for example, or Filipino. And we see in the data, and this is, you know, research we've been doing for a long time, we see these huge differences. One of the things COVID did do was unfortunately fuel anti-Asian racism and hate crimes. And so people who are Chinese or just look Chinese to others have experienced growing problems with hate and racism. The other thing that's interesting is there are different perceptions between newcomers and employers on what the barriers are. So newcomers tend not to see language as a big barrier, whereas employers often do. Newcomers often feel that education shouldn't be a barrier because often they're well educated, whereas employers are often looking for Canadian credentials, which of course is no longer acceptable. Newcomers say that they have trouble finding employment opportunities, but a lot of employers, in my view, are looking in very limited pots. So but the data is pretty clear. You've heard lots of employers talk about how they need skilled workers. 44% of internationally trained engineers are unemployed. That's twice the rate of those who are educated in Canada, and it's higher for women engineers. So we've also seen that people often will not even give someone an interview if they have a foreign sounding last name. And when it comes to entrepreneurial opportunities, we also see reports that immigrants need more assistance because they're trying to learn how to navigate legislation. They're trying to understand the market. They have more challenges getting access to financing and so on. And yet they have this huge potential. So when we think about some of the things that would help companies take better advantage of this incredible talent pool, because on the one hand, you have immigrants saying they can't get jobs, and you have companies saying they can't find employees. You have to think about this at multiple levels. We have to think about, you know, the legislative frameworks and the supports that we have. We're in a situation right now working, for example, on trying to support Afghan refugees. And true story, a woman who works for me who's from Afghanistan, her family fled in August to Pakistan. Her sister has been accepted at George Brown College, all fine, lined up the money to support her place to live. In applying for her student visa, she has to commit to returning to her home country. So on the one hand, we have Canada saying we need skilled people, we need skilled people, we need skilled people. Come to Canada with your skills. Come to Canada, study in Canada. And we're telling people from Afghanistan that they can't come to Canada to study unless they're prepared to go back to Afghanistan. So there's stuff in the legal system that really doesn't support the economic imperative to help more immigrants come to Canada. And, you know, we put a lot of energy into trying to understand what organizations can do to create more inclusive environments and the processes that can be put in place to sort of shift the thinking. So there are fewer barriers and people are thinking more of the opportunities immigrants provide as opposed to what they're lacking. And so, you know, I'm not going to go into this in great detail other than to say, depending on the size and the structure of your organization, thinking about leadership, thinking about boards, thinking about how you address the tone at the top, really important because, you know, when you have a leader who stands up and says, this is important, and we're going to intentionally try to find more diverse employees and especially immigrants, that speaks volumes. Hiring practices, thinking carefully about the processes that you use around defining the skills that you need, around finding the employees that you need. Once you get the employees, what are you doing to keep them and so on, is really important. And I recognize that with a lot of SMEs, there just aren't dedicated human resources in place. Often the person who's doing the hiring is the person who's doing the payroll, is the person who's buying the IT systems, is the person who's taking out the trash. So, you know, big companies can put a lot of dedicated resources into trying to identify qualified newcomers and bring them in. And that's why community agencies are really important in terms of helping identify candidates, but you also need companies to start to open their minds a little bit about where they are looking for employees. And I can give you one really quick example. Cognizant, which is a big multinational, came to me and said, we need employees who can use Pega, which is a low code, no code platform for developing applications. We want to meet the Dean of Engineering and Computer Science to get Pega courses into the curriculum. And I said, sure, I'll do that. No problem at all. Recognize, however, that this is a new thing. Professors don't like to learn anything new. Even if they like it, it's going to take 2 years to get it into the curriculum, and then, you know, probably 2 more years to graduate anyone. So just be ready. It's 4 years till you get this in place. But I said, you know, we've got computer scientists driving cab and working as security guards. I'll introduce you to these people, but I want you to do a pilot project with us. How hard is it to learn Pega? Oh, it's hard. It takes a year. No. How hard is it to learn Pega? I talked to the guy who teaches PEGA. He says he can do it in 2 months. And so I said to them, look, if we get you some qualified applicants, if you interview the applicants and you say, we will hire these people as long as they're PEGA certified, I'll run a program for you. And we had the first conversation the beginning of June. We agreed to proceed the middle of June. We started the program in July. And by the end of August, they had 20 certified PEGA systems developers. All of them were newcomers. Some of them had master's degrees. They'd been working in ridiculous jobs. And it really was just a matter of seeing what their potential was and then putting them through the program. So that's when we think about future skills, when we think about innovation, that's where our heads go, is how can we look at what people have, identify what they need, and figure out how to remove the obstacles for them into employment. Values and culture, of course, very important. Setting targets, of course, very important. You know, I'm a big proponent of the idea that what gets measured gets done. And if you leave things just to sort of vague good intentions, it often won't happen. We also think that applying diversity and inclusion lens to everything you do will actually help more with organizational success. And procurement, to me, is one of the most powerful tools in two ways. One is big organizations, governments, and so on are increasingly starting to use diversity and inclusion as a lens in making their procurement decisions. And it's not just government, it's lots of big corporations. And what that means is organizations that are doing diversity and inclusion well have better chance of getting certain government grants, certain contracts, and so on. And at the same time, for big organizations, procurement is a really powerful tool for supporting immigrant women, Indigenous entrepreneurs. You know, we're working with Starbucks right now on their diversity and inclusion policy. They have a policy that says they will make space for products and services that are developed by diverse businesses. So thinking through this is really important. And there's lots of stuff, both to support employment on the one hand and training and skills. And you have local groups as well. And there's also programs that are aiming at supporting newcomer entrepreneurs. And, you know, remember, newcomer entrepreneurs are future Chamber of Commerce members. So I think there's also something in this, not just on the employment side, but in terms of thinking about how you're building the business community and how you're supporting immigrant-led businesses. I mentioned, you know, we're working specifically with Afghan refugees right now. The government's committed to bringing 40,000. We've looked at the profiles. Some have low education, low skilled, just as the Syrians did. And some have, you know, MBAs, speak perfect English, and have years of experience working in financial institutions. So one of the things we're really focused on is how to transition them into employment. And just down the road, you have, you know, examples like Danby that went very hard on support for Syrian refugees, thinking about how they were going to use newcomers to help build community. And so they very innovative company. And they've now committed to helping with the Afghan refugees as well. At the end of the day, though, as I said at the outset, this really all comes down to our decisions and our choices, and how we as individuals decide who we're going to connect with, who we're going to mentor, who we're going to support, who we're going to reach out to, who we're going to lift as we climb. And so for me, it's important to focus not just on the skills that the newcomers need in order to fill the jobs that are available, but also to think about the skills that all of us need in order to effectively interact with them. And, you know, Peace by Chocolate is sort of the classic refugee entrepreneur story in Antigonish, of all places, Nova Scotia. So it's clear that newcomers can really help drive local economies, not just in large cities, but in small ones as well. And I love this ad that Lakeridge Health ran at the very same time the province of Quebec was talking about barbaric practices and kneecaps. We don't care what's on your head, we care what's in it. So thank you very much. I hope I have a few minutes for questions, but I will stop sharing my screen now.
What a great presentation. Thank you very much, Wendy. I guess I'd kind of like to start it off. We know the immigration process in Canada is probably one of the toughest immigration processes around the world. It's all centered around economic immigration, which is really good from a business perspective. We want to make sure that, and I know businesses want to make sure that we're bringing people in that actually match the skills that we require. One of the tests, or, you know, when they're completing their immigration paperwork is, you know, really it's a point system. So the higher the points you get, the better likelihood the government's going to accept you as an immigrant into our country. The problem is we get these people that get really high points because they're a surgeon, a doctor, an engineer. They get off the plane in Pearson Airport and they walk out of the airport and they have absolutely nowhere to work because the jurisdiction on the ground here hasn't met with the point structure or the process behind immigration. So we've got a federal government out there saying, you know, if you're this, if you're this, if you're this, you're going to give you all kinds of points. And then we got a provincial government that brings the laws into place on who can practice as a doctor, who can practice as a certified engineer, all of those kinds of things. And you know, it talks about really fair trade from an employment perspective and all of that. I can tell you this, that if there's a heart surgeon in India, and he or she comes here and I need heart surgery, I am quite sure when that surgeon opens up my chest, it's exactly the same ingredients inside as were in the chest that they opened up in India. Why have we not, between the federal and provincial governments, why have we not fixed those problems?
Really good point. And as much as I love to point the finger at government, in these instances, it's actually the regulators, it's the doctors themselves, it's the College of Physicians and Surgeons, it's the Canadian Medical Association and the Ontario Medical Association, which is led by a former OCC CEO. It's actually those regulatory bodies more, I would argue, than it is the government. And I agree with you completely. One of my colleagues has a internationally trained medical doctors program, which is focused on trying to help internationally trained medical doctors transition to other employment, because we have cases where internationally trained doctors did their Canadian exams, passed the exams, could not get the medical residencies needed to complete the certification, right? And therefore couldn't practice medicine. They did do some relaxation of the rules during COVID, so internationally educated doctors could work in nursing homes and so on. But I agree with you 100%. And it is a bit of a, you know, so I'm fingering the doctors themselves because it has to do with those regulatory bodies. But part of it is provincial government funding for those placements that are required in order to meet the requirements. And I'll take it a step further, Greg. The points are based on what I would call a class system, for want of a better word, in terms of professions. So the more education, the more sophisticated, you know, if you're a PhD in machine learning or something, you get more points. When it comes to apprentices or skilled trades, the volume, both the volume and the points associated with those are lower, much lower. And yet we know that, that people are screaming for skilled tradespeople. So you're absolutely right. There's definitely advocacy, I think, that's needed in order to push both the regulators and the professional associations to get real on some of this stuff.
Yeah, you know, I can remember having a conversation in our boardroom a number of years ago with a cabinet minister at the federal cabinet minister at the time, and you know there were other businesses around. We were talking about the immigration system and foreign trained workers and all of that kind of stuff. And one of the individuals there was owner of a local trucking company and said, you know, I'll hire 40 truck. This was 4 or 5 years ago. He said, I'll hire 40 truck.
Longfellow?
No.
Was it Lloyd? No.
Okay. Oh, no. It was actually when Stephen Harper was in cabinet. So Harry Goodyear was the minister that was here. But you know, this owner of this trucking company said, I'll hire 40 truck drivers right this afternoon if you can give them to me. I suspect today he'd hire 140 truck drivers today because they're in such demand. The problem is that truck driving isn't considered a red seal skill. So your number of points that you get as being a truck driver, well, you maybe don't get any points being a truck driver and trying to immigrate here. And of course, you know, as this owner of this trucking company said to this minister, you know, I'll tell you what, if you want to find out whether truck driving is a skill, I'll put you in a 45-foot tractor and give you a laneway to back down up to a loading dock. Oh, by the way, in downtown Toronto, and let's see how you fare. It is absolutely a skill. And I think the part of the problem is that it seems to be a top down. This is what you need. And businesses sitting down here at the bottom saying, no, it's not. We'll tell you what we need. And then I think it's regulatory bodies like the OMA who are really a creature of the province. The province gives them the regulatory authority. Yes. They can go in and say, no, you're not going to do that. It almost seems to be like a protectionist thing. It's a top down. I always say it's a bureaucrat writing the policy or the regulations behind the legislation who works at an office with no windows, who doesn't really see the whole world. There's a real important point that we need to open up from the bottom and get into those minds and say, you need to move this way. Otherwise, we're never going to meet the needs of business in the country.
Greg, I will commit to you in front of however many people are still here. I would love to work on something with you with the future, using the future skills hat. And we can get before ministers, but what we need is data. And I can tell you, in my mind, one of the dirty secrets, if you look at who is dominating the skills agenda in Canada, it's large corporations.
Yeah.
Large corporations account for 10% of private sector employment. But if you look at the reports that come out from the Business Council of Canada, the World Economic Forum, it's big businesses that are saying we need computer science and AI and engineers and And that is what is dominating the discussion. It's come so clear to me in the consultations we've been doing with the chamber, where people in factories across the province, often 100 to 200 employees, are saying we need manual labor. We used to say we need someone with a degree. Now we will take someone who comes to the interview. And I think that the big problem is we haven't mobilized, I would argue, as effectively with grassroots smaller businesses as the big businesses. If you look, we've talked about the same thing with the design of the SWIP program, for example. The Student Workplace Placement Program works really well for large corporations that have the infrastructure to support a co-op program. doesn't work so well for SMEs, where if they are going to invest the time in training someone, they want to keep them. And so we've designed programs that are, wage subsidy programs, but start when someone graduates and allow them to transition into employment. Or why wouldn't you use the same sort of model for high school grads in cases where you don't need post-secondary education? So I'm with you 100%. And I do think that it's an advocacy issue that has to be informed by evidence. And we just need to do a better job of getting that to the right people.
Yeah. I just don't know whether, government really knows that most of us here on the ground floor are scratching our head going, are you kidding me? Like, are you real in your assessment? We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we got doctors and medical professionals driving cabs in Toronto and Ubers. And, my goodness, the sensibility behind it sometimes, it really frustrates you. So, Wendy, I'd be absolutely happy to work on opening those doors and getting the discussion happening. And I know for sure that not only Rocco Rossi at the Ontario Chamber, but we will conscript Perrin Beatty from the Canadian Chamber, because I know he's right in tune with this as well and finds it such a frustrating subject, one that we've been talking about for such a long time. I want to see if there's any questions, because I've dominated your time, but well, here's a question from somebody. Our business, golf course, requires seasonal workers, and it's very challenging to fill these positions. More so recently with CERB. Any suggestions? I know Charlene is typing an answer to that right now in the chat, but, I think that kind of speaks to the thing we're talking about, right? So if you're a golf course professional in Europe, how to, you actually have a degree because you need to know how to grow grass properly and to maintain it and keep it green. You're a professional, but I would bet you there are no points that you would get on an immigration application to come to Canada.
Yeah, well, and even more, if you just need general laborers, you don't need a lot of English to mow a lawn, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think we could also look at is a lot of employers. Perlator came to us and said, can we have 5,000 Afghan refugees now, please? Because we have jobs all over the country. Here are the jobs, here are the locations. Please, may we have 5,000 Afghan refugees? Here are the job descriptions. Some don't need English. It's okay. It's all good. But when we said, well, would you be prepared to vouch for people who are not in Canada yet? Would you be prepared to sponsor some people to come in? And then they got all anxious. They want the people here on the ground. So I think there may also be something innovative that could be done with the provincial nominee program or some of the work permit programs, where a lot of organizations will say it's too complicated. It's too complicated. So maybe that's another thing to do, is to get organizations to work together, maybe through the chamber network, to have some help. I need these people, and have some folks who know how to navigate the paperwork, clarify what the obligation is, and actually help recruit internationally for those roles. I think that could be a solution as well.
Yeah. And I think, it's not, I guess the desperation from, industry leaders now is not, it's not just about having that warm body that walks in and comes in every day. It's now, I think, a lot of companies that I know who have experienced working through the immigration partnership or other programs that have hired immigrants have had such an incredibly positive experience out of that it's almost that they're looking to hire immigrants, because that's how they're going to forge forward. It gives them the ability to open up their minds to the rest of the world too, if they're a manufacturer of some sort. There's one question here: how can a small business help with getting immigrants to come in? This is something that's really interesting, because I know I worked with a very small business trying to get stainless steel welders to come in. These are extremely skilled people who can weld stainless steel and flawlessly weld it. And I can tell you, Wendy, the process was insane for them to try and help, even though this individual had identified about 6 folks in Europe to come over. It was unbearable, the cost and the effort that he had, and he's a small shop, 110 employees.
Well, it's the same problem I signaled at the beginning, which is a lot of SMEs in particular don't have like someone full-time doing their HR, let alone filling in all the paperwork. And that's why I wonder if it would be worth having a conversation to see if there's some way of centralizing. Because in my experience, and we've done this with research applications and other things, once you've done one, the second is easier, and doing 50 is really easy. Whereas if you have a whole bunch of people trying to learn the process in order to do 1 or 2, it's really daunting. But you could use the SWIP program to hire a bunch of smart students and teach them how to fill in the paperwork, right? At $20 an hour or whatever, and just push the stuff through. I think there's really an opportunity to leverage the power of the chambers to provide economies of scale, I would say, on some of these things. In the same way Magnet offers job matching supports, we're trying to work with the chamber to offer a platform for training and diversity and inclusion stuff. I think you could actually think about how could the chambers work together to provide capacity and a service as part of the membership, whatever, to SMEs to help navigate this stuff. And I'm sure you could scoop some money from ESDC or IRCC or somebody or other if you made the case for that.
We could probably scoop money from our members who are looking at, they'd be there. I know a lot of businesses that they can write a check, but they can't go through that process because they just don't have the ability to do it. And I think, it's really a shame when you start looking at, crazy little things like, oh, you want to come over here and study as a student? Well, you got to promise to go home after we've given you all of our skills and probably put you in a local business here working on a co-op program. That's complete insanity when, we should be saying, yes, come here. You can go back if you'd like to go back, but we'd also love the opportunity to welcome you into our fold as a place to grow your dreams. And I think, that's what we need to do. And maybe we need to, I know students that come over here, they're restricted to the number of hours that they're allowed to work. I think, what would really help right now, and certainly in the short term, is to extend those hours and allow them to work a 40-hour work week. We could probably use that, especially I know some of the hospitality organizations could certainly use that as well. But anyway, I'd love to keep you on. I could ask you a billion questions, Wendy, but we have to move through this. But please, let's stay in contact and let's work on this project together, because it's not just important for the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce members, it's important for every business in Canada. So Dr. Wendy Sukir, I can't thank you enough for your time this morning, and I certainly appreciate you being with us.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to have found such a passionate, well-informed ally, and I know there's something we can do to push this forward together. So thank you.
Outstanding. Thanks very much. Now I'm going to throw it over to my compadre, Caitlin Fancy.
All right. Yes, thank you so much, Wendy. That was fantastic. And up next, I would like to introduce Charlene Hoffbauer. Charlene brings 12 years of experience in workforce planning and development to the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, and is excited to be leading the organization in its 25th year of operations. Charlene is a strong believer that in order to overcome the challenges presented by today's rapidly changing labor market, we need good data to understand needs and trends. With that, we can work together across communities and industries to collaborate on solutions and discuss the needs for individualized ones. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in human resources, training, program development, and education to her work in Waterloo Region. Welcome, Charlene.
Thanks for having me. I'm just going to start my screen share here. Oops. And as always, I hit the wrong button. But I wanted to thank everyone for having me today. I'm looking forward to providing some of the data that Wendy was kind of talking about earlier, and even sharing some of those pieces and questions I was seeing in the chat that was happening in the question and answer. So my apologies, thought my slideshow started. So the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin is one of 26 planning boards across Ontario, responsible for certain areas, just to give you that heads up. And I'm going to kind of give you some background of what's happening locally with our workforce and with our labor market, so you can kind of understand. And I think as I go through it, some of you will start to get those questions answered about why people are not showing up, or why there are challenges. And I'm going to kind of move into talking about immigration locally with some numbers, and about some challenges and opportunities when it comes to our immigrant talent pool. So in Waterloo Region in October, we had about 23,000 people who were unemployed. That's about a 6.5% unemployment rate. And locally, most of our unemployed people are 20 to, or that there's about 6,100 who are 20 to 24. So their unemployment rate is actually 16.9%. So our younger youth are struggling a little bit in finding work. There's about 8,100 who are 25 to 44. And 2,600 of them, or 32%, are 25 to 29. So what we're seeing is our 20 to 29-year-olds are struggling more to secure work. While the unemployment rate overall is low, that group is struggling. And that group is not as skilled. So if you are looking for more skilled labor, this group may not be your first point of contact. But they would be a group that would fill some of those seasonal roles that the person from the golf course mentioned. And they would also fill some of those labor roles out there potentially. That 25 to 29-year-old is probably looking for that first real career job out of school. So kind of giving you an idea of what's happening locally, this is what's happening. Our other concern when we look at the local labor force is our not in the labor force number. So currently across Waterloo Region, we have over 150,000 people who are not looking for work and are not employed. When it comes to 15 to 19-year-olds, they're predominantly in school, hence why they're in this group. We have about 8,500 who are 20 to 24. So if we combine that 8,500 plus the 6,100, we're looking at 14,000 people, 20 to 24, who are either unemployed or not looking. Some of those will be college students, university students, and those groups. We have about 20,000 who are 25 to 44 and are not currently looking. And those may be parents, but I would like to point out that 3,000 of that age group came back into the labor market in October. So we're seeing these big jumps of people coming back into the labor market, and they're not moving into the unemployed. They're moving straight to employment in many cases. So there is obviously, in our minds, when we start looking at it, there's some reason they couldn't be in that labor market. And now they are able to participate in that labor market. And so they're going straight from not even looking for a job to jumping into a job. They're not taking that unemployment step and then moving. So if you're thinking about posting jobs, things like that, you're going to find people who are passively looking and they jump right in. The bigger concern right now is that we know that 99,000 of the people who are not in the labor force are 55 years of age and older. 75,000 of that are 65 plus. If you want to know why we're really interested in that number, is these are our baby boomers. They've left They're probably not coming back if they're 65 and over, or they're thinking they might come back in a year or two and maybe work part-time or contract or as they need to. That 55 to 64 is the tail end of the baby boomers. They're all going to be retired potentially by 2030 because they'll all have reached that 65 point. And they are starting to slowly transition out as well. The numbers are small and it varies month to month, but we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic to now, this group was very engaged, was working, and now they've started to move out. And we think this may be because there is burnout happening with some of them, especially among teachers and nurses, and that some of them may return in a year or two, but they may be done as well. And if you're wondering, a 55-year-old is a Gen Xer. So we're seeing that baby boomer tail end, and we're starting to see potentially the beginning of Gen X, especially if they have a pension and can retire at 55, deciding maybe that they're done with the labor market as well. So just to give you that idea, retirement is driving that not in the labor force number. And as more people remove themselves from the market, we have a smaller pool. So when we have a smaller pool, we need to find new ways to engage people. And this is where immigration can play a key role in helping us diversify that workforce and meet some of these challenges. So immigration numbers in Canada. I think it was just yesterday, I heard another institute, I'm not sure which one it was from, say that 1 in 4 or 26% of workers in Canada are immigrants. When we talk about immigrants, we often talk about landing. And so just to give some perspective, if you're an employer and you're not sure, landed immigrants are a term we use that means we legally convert a foreign national to a permanent resident. So we take someone like a temporary foreign worker or someone here who's on some sort of permit, whether it's an international student or someone else, and we turn them into a permanent resident. And when we've heard those numbers coming from the government, that's what that means. So just so I can clarify that so everyone's on the same page. So giving an idea of landed immigrants in Canada, prior to the pandemic, we were seeing about 25 to 35,000 landed immigrants a month. In April of 2020, that number drastically dropped to 4,000 immigrants that month. So you take into account that, you know, we're used to about 25, 35,000 across the country, and now we're at 4,000. So the shortages in 5 months would be 100,000 people, or 5 months is 100,000 people potentially. That's how much we're not bringing in at that point for 2020. So our goal in 2020 was 341,000, and we only brought in 184,000 immigrants. So it's a little over half, doing it really quick calculations, of where we thought we would be. And to kind of put this in perspective a little bit further for you, from January to September, we landed 267,000 immigrants. 45,000 of those were in September. It's one of the highest immigrant months that we have seen in modern history. And to meet our target, again, of over 400,000, we need to land about 134,000 immigrants between October to December. So that's about 45,000 a month. And it seems like really big numbers, but the key thing is we're talking about landed immigrants. So we're talking about converting people who are on some sort of permit into that permanent resident. So in many cases, those people are already in our country, and they're possibly connected to the labor market in some way. So to give you an idea of how much this has kind of changed what we're doing, in Canada, our population only grew by 0.5% in 2020. That's the lowest growth rate since World War I. So we have not seen a big population increase. In fact, we tend to replace ourselves at 1.5 when full replacement is 2.1. So our population is not growing how it could grow. And so with that in mind, and thinking about all of these labor shortages we're seeing how this population can become an answer to some of our workforce concerns. We also know that the immigrants who tend to come to the country, and Wendy did kind of connect with this, you know, they're highly skilled because of the point system and other pieces there. We know that most of them choose Ontario, And we know that many of them are working age. And when they're working age, that means they could be younger. And so they are an active, vibrant force that Ontarian businesses could use and Ontario communities can incorporate to address some of these concerns. So this is why this is so important today, about knowing some of the facts or some of the stories behind the numbers. In Ontario, to kind of give you a perspective of how immigrants fare in the Ontario market versus those born in Canada, these are the stats for Ontarians born in Canada who are 15 plus in 2020. So we saw an unemployment rate of 9.1%. We saw a participation rate, which means people are working or looking for work, of 64.8%. We saw an employment rate of 58.9%. So that employment rate is partly, we did have a bad year in 2020, let's be honest, a lot of shutdowns. There were a lot of concerns, but that's kind of where the Ontarian born in Canada, who's 15 plus, stood. Here's where the recent immigrant who's landed 5 years or less stood. Much higher employment rate of 4%. Participation rate, though, was higher. So even though there was higher unemployment, there was still a lot of immigrants in the market who had been landed within the past 5 years, and their employment rate was higher. So there's a piece that we can look at it and go, okay, so what's driving some of these pieces? How do we dig down to find out what the story is here? And immigrants landed more than 5 years and less than 10. The employment rate was 13.2%. Participation rate is about the same, and the employment rate is higher still. So we are seeing a potential of a community and a talent pool that is looking for work, is engaged in work, has some success in work, and we need to explore how we engage them further. Excuse me. Looking at the 25 to 54 group, that's our prime working group plus about 10 years. And we can see that there are some major differences. So there is some exploration that can be done around how we engage these groups better and create better successes for them. And I think the conversation between Greg and Wendy kind of hinted at some of those things that we could look at doing in the next while. And I know Van, who's following me, can talk more about some of those engagement pieces for employers. So one of the groups I do want to focus on is international students. Educational trends right now point to more international students being interested in Canadian schools over American schools. There's some with the racial issues going on in the US and some very different governments and difficult governments. More international students are feeling safer in Canadian schools than they would in American schools. International students can work in Canada. There are some limitations, I think, around hours and environments, but it's very much, this is a talent pool that can be accessed. And to give you an idea of what our local schools look like, in December of 2019, we knew that there were 307,000 international students in Ontario. We take in 48% of all the international students in Canada. We know that Conestoga alone in 2021 had 8,000 international students. They weren't all here, but they had 8,000. 22% of undergrads at the University of Waterloo in 2019-2020 were international students. And Laurier reported that this year they have 1,504 students at all graduate levels partaking locally. So there's a pool there. I'm not sure exactly what the Waterloo number is, but just between Conestoga and Laurier, there's potential pool there of 9,500 people who could be working in some of our occupations. So I think the question becomes, how do we get to them? And it's possible that through the college and the universities, we could look at how to access some talent to build and fill our vacancies. As I said, the pandemic, many left as the classes were offered online. They have been returning to program. I was speaking to Conestoga, and I know that the School of Engineering and that skilled trades have seen some of their international students return, especially those where there are labs or hands-on work required. Isolation and quarantining guidelines are in place. But not many people know that after grad, the international students are eligible for a post-graduation work permit. And that work permit could lead to permanent residency. So here's this group that we could be, as employers, looking at engaging. And as we're looking at engaging them, we could be thinking about how we're going to engage them after graduation and keep them on as employers. If we're looking for that return on investment, this is a place where we could be looking at how to create those successes locally with our post-secondary institutions to fill some of those gaps and create those opportunities locally for international students to become Canadian. As well, the #1 programs that our international students tend to take tend to be the STEM, so the scientific, technical, engineering, and math. That was also something I had heard just as of yesterday. So keeping that in mind and moving forward. Another talent pool we'd like to look at is the temporary foreign workers. So to bring in someone as a temporary foreign worker, and we had kind of, you know, in the chat, there had been some discussion around this. A labor market assessment needs to be completed showing a shortage of labor in Canada on that occupation. So there is some groundwork that does need to be done to bring in a temporary foreign worker, but groups like my group or even StatsCan can help you, the job bank actually, can help you develop that labor market assessment around this. In 2019, we know that there were 470,000 work permits issued, which is 120,000 more than in 2018. So this is becoming one of the major workforce talent pools that's filling some of those vacancies out there. From January to March of 2020, we know that there were 33,000 temporary foreign worker permits issued. Most of those were to agricultural workers. I know that locally up in Dufferin, because they do potatoes, they are the head of the temporary for like the agricultural worker program. And at that point, I know up in that region that they were already looking at bringing in workers and getting the permits lined up early last year. And they did that again this year. So we can kind of watch what happens in Dufferin and then from there determine how it's going to flow across the different places in the province where there is a need for agricultural workers. So we keep our eye on that and keep connected to our potato farmers up in Dufferin County to see what challenges are happening for the year. We did see a decline in people coming through the program, but the number of permits issued remained high because many people were already in the country. So what we did not bring in new people, but we saw permits remain high because students were switching to that post-grad work permit, which technically is under the temporary foreign worker program. And there were other things that kept those permits high. So that group did remain a large workforce for locally for us. And the other side of the picture is to talk a bit about the job demand. So we kind of know what's been happening in immigration. We know what's happening workforce-wise. So what's happening job demand-wise. So last month alone, there were 3,800 jobs posted online, and we know that about 1,300 companies were hiring. So we're looking at a very high in-demand market locally. This is just Cambridge. Interestingly, for the first time since we've been watching this data, which was April of 2020, we're seeing that the demand for that post-secondary and apprenticeship person is almost as high as that occupation-specific training or on-the-job training. So when we talk about occupation-specific training, we're talking about those personal support workers, those truck drivers that Greg was mentioning. You know, those are still in very high demand, and they used to dominate our job postings, and they still are dominating the job postings, but the number of jobs that require a post-secondary or apprenticeship is rising. So we're seeing across Cambridge that the demand is there across a lot of different occupations. In fact, it's across 415 occupations locally. And the top 5 industries by posting, that's the number of postings that industry had, and then what the industry was. So we're seeing that administrative and support or waste management is number 1. That is driven by employment agencies. And employment agencies need so many people because small and medium-sized businesses do not have the resources right now to recruit for the number of positions that they need. And even the large companies are starting to revert to employment agencies. So they can't find the people, they're employing employment agencies to help them find the people, and we're starting to see there are not enough people. So businesses are using dollars to recruit people who aren't exactly there. And that's been evident, as I explained, through the slow growth. Retail is very high. Healthcare and social assistance needs a number of people. And they're number 3, construction and manufacturing. So if you look at kind of the skill sets involved in each of those industries, we start to see why that 1,800 secondary occupation specific on the job training roles are so important, is because that's where our postings are. And those are the dominant industries that those postings reside in. But at the same time, we've also found that immigrants are overrepresented in some industries. And so I'd like to kind of talk about where they are overrepresented. The Conference Board of Canada just pulled this information not too long ago. And so I thought I would share so we could kind of be aware of where immigrants are overrepresented and where potentially we have opportunity to attract more immigrants into our industries. So I have here 23.8, but yesterday was just updated. I forgot to update the slide. They're 26% of the Canadian workforce, and they're overrepresented in transit and passenger transportation, which is everything from our taxis to our buses to even some rail, I think might be in there. Food manufacturing is really dominated by immigrants at almost 35%. I do know that some of the smaller food manufacturers, that is the major source of their talent right now. We talked about the administrative and support services and the employment agencies. Truck transportation, we were just talking about that with Wendy and Greg. There is a high percentage of immigrants who do undertake that. And in fact, we ran a truck driver training program called Drive Forward locally. And we had a lot of immigrants take part in that program. The hope was to diversify our industry locally, because even though they are high percentage across the country, locally there are some opportunities to diversify the local talent pool. So we took that opportunity. Nursing and residential care facilities. Healthcare does tend to have a lot of immigrants working in that field. There's a heavy reliance actually in healthcare. Looking at some of the stats, we know that 23% of registered nurses in Canada are immigrants. And then from there, positions go all the way to 54% of dental technicians are immigrants. So parts of the healthcare system do rely on that immigrant talent force to be able to keep open the beds and to take care of all of us. And we do know that the nursing and residential care facilities do employ a lot of immigrants locally. Personal and laundry services and food and restaurant services also employ quite a few immigrants, more than other industries. Temporary foreign workers are 1.4% of our labor force, and they tend to be higher represented in food service, again, in accommodation services, so our hotels, and manufacturing and professional, scientific, and technical industries. So there's a mix there as well of that professional, scientific, and technical that may require programs that are post-secondary, but also that general labor is shown throughout those first 3, where those are not. Some positions may require that occupational specific training, but they could also take somebody who has that great experience in food service, could be a cook or a chef, but it could also be a waitress in some cases. So that's where immigrants are overrepresented across Canada. And when we looked at some of the postings, we're kind of thinking like, where could immigrants maybe get ahead? Where could they have opportunities to develop their skill, and where could employers who have these sorts of things look to the immigrant talent pool for opportunities? And I'm going to start with job postings that require a second language. I said there were about 3,800 jobs. In Cambridge alone, 161 of those jobs required a second language. French was dominant, and we do know that some of our immigrants do bring French with them as a second language, and then they can take jobs right away while they're undertaking training for their third language, which would be English. Those roles tend to require high school or occupation specific, and they tend to be sales and service roles. So it's an opportunity for immigrants to immerse themselves in that Canadian culture in a language that they are familiar with while they're learning that third language of English. So it's an opportunity as employers to look and go, hey, I could hire this person and they can work today, considering they've got the skill set and they've got the language. We just need to work on the English skills. And you can work scheduling. Sales and service tends to be a little bit more, the hours differ a lot more. So maybe there's opportunities to work with immigrants to bring them on board into those sales and service roles where that second language is available. There's also a very big diversity of roles and demand. I kind of hinted at this, I talked about how it was almost evenly split between post-secondary and that on-the-job or occupation-specific background in the region. Well, last month, Cambridge recruited for 415 different occupations. That means we have a lot of different demands, and 19 of the 20 industry classifications were hiring. So we have a lot of jobs, a lot of diversity of jobs, and that means we can take in a lot of different types of people, including immigrants, to fill those roles. So we have that opportunity to say, you know what, yes, there's a real demand for laborers and those. We also know there's a whole bunch of other roles that immigrants could fill locally, 415 different occupations alone in Cambridge. So that's an opportunity for us to reach out as employers, and Van will tell us more how we reach out and do that, and for immigrants to be employed and to move forward locally in Cambridge and across Waterloo region. There are also challenges in what I was reading the job postings. I could see exactly where the challenges would exist for our immigrant talent pool. So the need for driver's license. 700 plus postings required a license to do the job. This is a concern because right now the drive test centers are running behind. They're they're overbooking where they can to get everybody driver's license. So if we have somebody who's that 5-year immigrant or less looking to work, and they see this job where they could work into, but they need a driver's license, it's still going to take them time to get that driver's license because we are so backed up locally on the actual driver testing. The need for specific training. And this was alluded to as well, it may not be recognized in Canada. There's challenges in getting equivalency. We talked about doctors and, the challenge to get residency, but there's lots of different challenges in taking that post-secondary or that apprenticeship and moving it sometimes to a Canadian environment. And so immigrants who maybe have that education can't apply for those 1,400 jobs. They have to maybe look at applying for one of those 1,800 jobs. And so that's doing a disservice because that's taking a talent pool that's active and we could use and not using them and not letting them go to their full potential. And so that's something as employers we can start talking about. The need for a vehicle. 272 postings needed regular access to a vehicle. When immigrants come, they do have savings, but it may not be enough to purchase a new or used vehicle. And right now, I don't know if you've driven by any of the parking, the car dealers, but there's not a lot of inventory. And that is a challenge because prices may go up as a result of that. And so now we've got a situation where someone needs regular access to a vehicle. Maybe they've got the driver's license. Maybe they could, afford a car prior to the pandemic, but because of low inventory, potentially they can't find what they're looking for, or they can't purchase what they're looking for. And finally, English language development. ESL classes were virtual last year, and not everyone could access learning, either because they lacked the tech skills, which is very real. They lacked the technology itself. ESL classes did try to get out Chromebooks to people. They tried to find ways to be unique. I think some of them were doing paper copies, and you could walk up to the ESL, you'd sign out your copy, and then you'd bring it back and you'd have a conversation with the teacher. And as much as we want to think we're a very digital community, there's still a lot of places where the internet access is not reliable. I have staff who are in cities, and even then sometimes they have to turn off their cameras in order to interact in meetings. So these are very real concerns that stopped that English language development for some of our new immigrants But on the positive side, we are seeing reopening with in-person classes in ESL, and we are seeing some of that as well in literacy and basic skills for those immigrants who come here who don't even have literacy skills in their first language, let alone their second language. So we are seeing that slow reopening with in-person classes. Right now, there's a bit of a hybrid depending on how people can access things. And there's opportunity, even though it's a challenge, there's opportunity for employers to connect with those language development classes and figure out ways to bridge those gaps. There is a program locally that's working with employers. The candidates who go to work, they're hired, they're employees, and they get some language training at different points during the day. So we are looking at those innovative opportunities to make sure that people are engaged and that they can be employed while they are learning those skills. Which brings me to Van Malaches, who is actually going to talk about some of those things I hinted at and can tell us more about how you as an employer can access immigrant talent.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Fantastic, and so much valuable data there. And as you said, up next, we have Van Malaches. Van Malaches is currently the Supervisor of Employment Services with YMCA of Three Rivers in Cambridge. In his role, he works collectively with staff to enhance employment opportunities for individuals in the community. Van believes that by offering a range of resources, supports, and service components to respond to both the career and employment needs of individuals, as well as the skilled labor needs of employers, that we can build a stronger workforce. Van holds a degree in political science in public policy from the University of Windsor and a bachelor's degree in education from Duville College. Good morning, Van.
Good morning, Caitlin. Thank you for having me today and being able to speak on behalf of this topic. It's amazing the insight and the depth of the information provided this morning, and I just want to be able to provide additional information that is sort of, I would say, more at the local level than anything more in the sense of what we can do in the community of Waterloo region to allow us, the perspective of what's happening within our situation at hand. And so what I wanted to do was begin first and foremost by addressing the perspective of how we as service providers can sort of incorporate our purpose within the region and within the area, and sort of connecting with Charlene this week, and then looking at potential conversations that I've had with individuals and employers, looking at publications of what seems to be the driving force to alleviating this problem. It sort of comes down to many perspectives, and I wanted to focus in on the lens of the newcomer and also the employer, and then what we can do as service providers. What normally happens is we look at our relationship in hiring in a dimension that is very linear. It sort of moves from a perspective or a conversation piece that you'll drive a job posting through Indeed or through your own website of your company and your location, and then respondents will start providing that acknowledgement of being interested in the potential job that might be available, training that might be available, and it's very linear in that model and that approach. What we try to do and what we're trying to do today, and what I would like to sort of accentuate, is the need to provide communication with service providers in our local area. And by doing that, I think it enhances the conversation piece a little bit more to provide employers and newcomers with the assets or the support that we can provide, be it through programs, be it through services, and more importantly, the supports on a daily basis that can be generated for an employer and for newcomers as well. What those look like really depends on the situation for both parties involved. And by encompassing everybody within that framework, I think it's important to understand that there are supports available more in a triangular basis than it is at a level that is, again, linear between the employer and a newcomer. And from that perspective, or from that lens, I think it allows both the newcomer and the employer to reach out to service providers to see what additional supports can be provided on an ongoing basis. From there, I sort of stepped back from what I heard today with Wendy, and I think Nora alluded to this as well. But I wanted to look at it from a lens of the newcomer and from an employer, and what's been sort of generated through conversations and through publications, and sort of get a grasp of what's happening from each lens. So for the newcomer in Waterloo region, how is your experience? I'm sorry?
Would you be able to reshare your screen just so that we can see it full screen?
Oh, my apologies.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to see where I'm.
So if you just stop sharing, I think we're just seeing the kind of behind the scenes of your slides.
Okay, sure. My apologies.
And then reshare it while clicking on the full screen presentation.
Okay, just one moment. My apologies, everybody. How's that? Is that working?
Fantastic. And then we'll just start the slideshow from there.
Okay, my apologies for that. I hope that didn't alter the messaging so far.
No worries.
But thank you. But what I wanted to do is look at the three key factors that sort of came to light when discussing employment with newcomers and reading through publications and understanding what seems to be the daily occurrence in finding employment. Really narrowing it down to individual hopes, what causes angst, what causes concern, and when you feel actually ready to engage into the labor market per se. And I find it really interesting that based on the responses and the feedback, that it really brought to the forefront the lens and the perspective of what a newcomer felt as they were going through that process. And I think it's pretty telling, and not only telling in the sense from the newcomer perspective, but how these pieces of information and feedback are also similar from very different lenses, including the service provider and the employer. So what did we find here in general was the 6 major themes or observations from newcomers is I really want to accentuate the fact that I'm reliable and dependable. And I have the skill set that provides employers the ability to count on me, to understand what I can provide to organizations and to businesses within the community. And I felt that was very telling because it's a constant theme that occurs with the employers that are engaged in hiring as well. So knowing that those pieces, the motivation, the dependability, and the reliability are so crucial for newcomers to accentuate, that I really feel that that's an asset that is only going to be more helpful for employers on a daily basis. The next objective or observation from newcomers was the gap in understanding the expectation and adjusting to life. It is not something that happens easily, sometimes a little bit more difficult in the sense of daily occurrences and expectations. But when individuals do find employment, and when newcomers have gained employment, the key observation that has been found throughout this duration and process is the disconnect between, I thought I was finding employment to work in a cognitive manner compared to the ability to work as a team. And I thought that was really telling in the sense that I'm here to do a job. I'm here to really make sure I do it to the best of my ability, understanding the rules and the parameters that are expected from the employer. But the disconnect or the added feature is the approach of teamwork. And it's something where when you look back at it and you listen to that in the context that it's provided, that relies more on the social skills, more on the ability to communicate in an effective manner. And it was very telling for me to hear that and to sort of attain that feedback on a frequent basis through these observations. There is a strong desire, as I said, to be cognizant of the rules and the responsibilities within a workplace setting. And that is fundamental to doing a good job. It's sort of the piece that is part and parcel to making sure that I'm being reliable and dependable and a great attribute or a great addition to an organization. On the other hand, it is also sort of provided that as I'm feeling accustomed to and getting on board with my ability to work for companies and local businesses, I want to make sure that that the fairness is equitable and that I don't feel that I'm being sort of moved over to the side, or if things that might be present for certain employees are not present for me. And that connectivity or disconnect is something that is really observed with newcomers. I just want to be part of the equation and succeed in the direction that the business or the organization is moving to. The third observation that newcomers have addressed is just the ability to understand the Canadian job market. And Greg alluded to this, and everybody's alluded to this, is how can there be an abundance of employment opportunities, yet I'm still finding it frustrating to find gainful employment? And lacking the understanding of a proper job search, lacking the understanding of how the methods and approaches do occur in attaining employment. There's a point where within all of us that we feel that, I'm sort of struggling here because I've put out resumes, I've sort of tried to do everything I possibly can, yet I'm still in the same position that I see myself maybe a few months previous. And I don't seem to be getting any traction, yet I'm hearing that there's an abundance of employment opportunities available. The constant theme within the entire presentation today has been the need for essential skills and more importantly for essential language comprehension and understanding. And if I look at this feedback and this lens, it goes to being self-conscious or not understanding the language in the sense that is really effective to be part of the equation with an employment opportunity. And so that really causes a little bit of what I would say fear, apprehension, ability to pause, and not be so inclined to provide solutions if it's something where I just don't know if I can sort of articulate or if I can show through body language or other means or observations to assist in the ability to work in an employment setting that is going to be understanding of those barriers. And that really defines sort of the lens of where some newcomers feel that I don't know if it's adequate to what I have. And they realize very quickly that it's essential, but I've always felt that that really comes down to the employer. And in the next few slides, hopefully that will be provided a little bit more in a clearer sense that I've never felt the barrier for the English language is at the discretion of anybody, sometimes other than the employer, to see what they can do to alleviate any problems of comprehension in English. Again, alluded to earlier, just the credential assessment. Individuals that are in a professional setting back at home, and then come to the realization that you know what, there's a disconnect here with me possibly and potentially having to go back to school, waiting for my credentials to be assessed, the cost that might be associated to it as well, and what that means for me on a daily basis to you know, provide for myself or my family, and to really step back from that and say, you know what, in the meantime, I don't know if this is a viable option as it once was. The last point here about being able to attain you know, the relevant and necessary information from war-torn countries, and to be able to gain that can be very challenging for newcomers to go through this process in a manner that's going to be effective, but more importantly, from the lens that I see it from, to come to that realization where I don't know if this is going to be something where I can move in the direction of doing what I did previously back home, especially trained professionals in that capacity. And finally, the limited knowledge that newcomers have expressed with regards to being very closely connected with their friends and family. The ability to network out, to feel comfortable and safe to do that, has been a recurring point of feedback from newcomers routinely, from family members that will make cold calls, to being present during the interview and providing that guidance, but never going past a certain scope or boundary, with the comfort of reaching out and opening up the network of opportunities that exist with, probably to put in the context of, further than their family members, and to sort of stay within that realm of it. The examples I can share with you are, I'm just gonna sort of watch what my family members doing and consider just you know, becoming a painter as well, and maybe doing an apprenticeship. I don't have many skills that I can put on my resume, so I'm just going to maybe, you know, start cleaning homes and enhance my resume from there of members that are part of my family, to accentuate the skills that they might have, but then to transfer that over to their resume to make themselves more viable for employment in the community. So broadening out is really important here for newcomers to understand what is available past their own home and within their own family and friends. And it was alluded to earlier, and the feedback here has been transportation being a barrier. Somewhere where opportunities might exist that are not on a public transit route, that might be more of a barrier because I cannot take a certain shift at a certain time because I rely on transportation that I would not have available to me to make this connection for an employment opportunity. I thought that speaks quite highly in this area within the Waterloo region. And I think when I look at continental shifts, or when I look at you know, midnight shifts, that's something that employers are trying to remedy, but we still haven't become apt to finding a solution to alleviate that issue. So what happens from the lens of an employer? And the questions that I sort of took forward were, have you hired somebody as an immigrant or a newcomer? What was your experience? And if you haven't, why not? And what kinds of things would be helpful for a newcomer to have in place before they apply for a job with you? And what have you heard from other employers, either through PAC committees that you might be involved in, or through the chamber? Those are key points to me that I really wanted to get feedback on, because again, trying to remove or narrow down the disconnect between having an abundance of opportunities, yet not being able to fill those vacancies. And what does diversity mean in your workplace? What does it mean to have newcomers in your workplace, and how that gratifies and accentuates the cultural differences within your organization? And what happens again? Van, I'm just looking for people that are motivated, dependable, reliable. The soft skills are such a tangible piece that it really brings home the fact that there's a constant between the employer and the newcomer. We just need to bring that more readily to one another. Every employer has said, I can take the time to train, but I really need the ability to have somebody present. And I think this is where the connection can really be enhanced between newcomers and potential employers. Here we go back to the essential skills. And I found this to be very interesting in the sense that for those local employers, the minimal staff members, it was very difficult for them to look and consider opportunities within a small business. And a local bakery was a great example. And the opportunity to hire on, but what was the concern was if I'm short staffed and I need somebody at the front, how do I alleviate that issue? How do I make that work for both a staff member that's a newcomer and for my business? And I thought that was a relevant question to ask. And I do feel that through problem solving, I do think through, Wendy alluded to it as well, the concept of on-the-job training, listening to wording and language on a daily basis really can alleviate some more barriers that we think are unmovable, but they're actually a little bit easier to adjust to than realize. I think this is a piece that really is up to the employer. Where an employer would like to move, how accommodating they're going to be really will signal to somebody that, listen, I'm on board. We're going to try different ways and variations to be able to adjust to the language barrier on a consistent basis. The feedback from employers on several occasions has been, just I really appreciate people coming in and dropping off resumes and being connected to us and wanting to work. But during certain times of the day, it's a little bit very difficult to sort of have that happen. And employers, from what I sense, is just a little bit of an understanding of the organization, the business, and where you would fit into the equation of it. Now, with the pandemic and with the enormous amount of vacancies available, I don't know to what level that is of a necessity. But being cognizant of a workday and then being able to work within the measures of meeting an employer directly, either through a face-to-face drop off of a resume or by scheduling an interview with regards to what can be determined for next steps to find employment when it's meaningful and allowable for the employer to take that time to come to a conclusion of hiring somebody that would need the opportunity within that business. And so that to me is quite, I don't see it as a barrier per se. I see that to be just the timing of a situation for both the employer and for newcomers as a whole. And finally, I think this one went back to, and the reason I highlighted a little bit was I just want to be fair in the approach, because I really felt that this one became more of a situation where, the team approach seemed to be the void that was happening when individuals would come on board. Again, we go back to that cognitive approach of I'm here to work diligently and to work to the best of my ability. And the part that employers provided, again, we're on the basis of just the teamwork approach, Van. It's just something that might not be to the ability that we want, but we can work through many other things. It's just that team environment and being open to learning. And sometimes that's where the disconnect might happen as well. And then the last one that I thought was really relevant here was from employers that really knew what we do as service providers to not even knowing that we were in the community and engaging into our services that we offer, that we can offer financial incentives to employers that need that to alleviate training, to provide interpreters during an interview process if we have clients that are, you know, a match and something that would provide the opportunity for individuals to be connected with employers. So there's many things that on that level where employers are very aware of Employment Ontario providers within the community, and those that really felt that there was no existence or support within the community to provide them the help that they need. From the lens of the EO providers, really stepped back on this to look at what strategies were most effective for us to assist newcomers. What did we find to be successful? What types of employers within the region are the most welcoming to newcomers in the region? What consistent feedback do we receive from newcomers with regards to challenges that they face in their job search? And this is something, again, where we look at it that there are consistent messages through the newcomer, through the employer, and us as service providers. And most importantly, to make that connection occur in a positive manner, what can we do to assist companies to make that, that hiring not only for the moment, but just for the longevity? And the word I think that really captivated to me today was the retention of not having the cyclical experience of here I need to hire again. But what can be provided where we have longevity for the newcomer and for the employer involved? And again, this is something that I feel is a recurring theme. But for us as service providers, I've always felt it necessary to move that to a collective conversation, again, with the employer involved. What do I notice in the language ability? What do I notice in the cadence, the accent? Are these things that are going to impede, you know, the process of somebody being gainfully employed and being an effective contributing employee to that organization? And I've always felt that by problem solving through it, by finding other means of communication, that it really accentuates the ability to believe and to enhance the comfort level for newcomers to feel that there's been every possible avenue taken in attempting to make this opportunity work. And I think when that happens, it bodes well for everybody involved. Understanding, again, the work culture. Maybe the shock of it, maybe the ability to say, you know, the norms that I had previously in my experiences back home are something that really are a disconnect for me to understand. And it was important that what I felt necessary was always to offer information and workshops for newcomers as a whole. But workshops might not only be the remedy here. They could be one-on-one conversations that we can have to sort of deflect any notions of what the culture is within the workplace. And by providing that insight, by providing that reflection, by giving a little bit of more expertise on our side, I think we can alleviate that on a more frequent basis. And this is an area that really predominantly, I don't think it just sometimes excludes newcomers. I think it involves all of us. It's a very interesting manner and perspective of how to go about finding employment within the community, how to build a proper resume, how to do the most effective aspects of networking. And these things are difficult in itself, but when you add the other layer of being a newcomer, I do feel that it's on us a little bit and our ownership to really provide that insight either through workshops, again, or through individual conversations. Knowing the norms of how job searching works and removing that from what is once known previously to what becomes sort of the necessity of attaining employment within our community. Just a huge proponent of mentoring and job placement. And it's a service that we offer in the sense that by reaching out to service providers, by us having a conversation with employers, I do feel that this is something that really provides the foundation for everyone involved. And when you see things come to fruition that exist 15 years later, there's a company on Beverly Street in Cambridge that I'm just really fond of, to see somebody that's been there now for a duration that I would never have expected, and to see how that relationship has blossomed and prospered is based on the fact that as service providers, to be able to connect and make the proper referral to alleviate the need for the employer in their needs for filling vacancies is one thing, but to get into the next level of providing that that mentorship capacity was really something that builds upon itself and only enhances our community as a whole. And it can be from the simplest things of, you know, attaining a license, how to sort of maneuver through the daily nuances of our community. I think that is a key component that we can offer to employers on a daily basis. And I'm just going to wrap up on the final two things here, but it's essential that we understand the beliefs, we understand the newcomer in a greater detail and in a greater perspective, understanding what limitations, what areas we would need to be accommodating to, and then building a rapport with employers to understand those pieces to attaining employment and having somebody come into your organization and businesses. And for us to be aware of this and to be the liaison between employers and newcomers, I think we do that effectively. I think we do that in such a manner that is successful, because there's everybody trying to attain the conclusion of employment for everyone involved. And I think that really speaks volumes when we look at it from a service provider lens of what is essential for a job placement or just employment to help alleviate some circumstances. And then finally, I did want to touch upon this as well for, you know, the awareness for us to take into consideration again that perspective of individuals that have come to our community that are struggling with the transition, or, you know, experiencing maybe delays in employment. I think we really want to accentuate the support for newcomers that's available. You know, when we notice that appointments are being missed, or there's a reluctancy to be involved, the experiences of leaving war-torn countries, I do feel that we can offer that authentic human approach to alleviate circumstances, to allow somebody to take the small steps to finding employment. There's a capacity here that mental health is only a local issue that we deal with in Ontario and in Canada. And I want it to be reflective that, you know, those are traumatic experiences. Those are different events for different individuals that come to our area that experience some trepidation of being involved on a daily basis. And then to conclude, just the observations that I found throughout each group. English being the most prominent feedback that I received. How do we remove that that standard? How do we remove that matter to be less frequent of an issue try to problem solve through that. Newcomers not understanding the workplace culture. Very, very different mindset with regards to what was experienced previously, what employers sort of have a perspective about, and what actually exists to blend both perspectives together. A difficult time again for newcomers to understand the job search and the labor market within the community. And that sort of concludes with the last one is really on our part as service providers, connecting employers and newcomers on a routine and on a frequent basis. That is so fundamental to what we can do within the community. And when I look at the abundance of supports that we do have within the community, all under the umbrella of Employment Ontario service providers, the first point for anyone that would want to sort of stay connected and be involved, to have their job postings reviewed or to be submitted, I really encourage all employers to reach out either for the first time or as a return connection with our services, and encourage newcomers that, you know, within our community, our local community, and I think this is the achievement that I think is really necessary, that we can funnel this down from a provincial level to a regional level to a local level, that for newcomers, we are here, we exist, we would support you to the end of the day, and to make sure that if we don't have the services at that moment that are going to be relative to what you need, for us to be able to make those referrals to other organizations and other service providers that can support the capacity for you to attain employment and to be successful. I want to watch my time here, and I just wanted to thank everybody for patiently listening through and taking into consideration the three elements that I think is really important to understand for this topic. I felt, you know, if there's a remedy to alleviate how we can fill the void in the labor market that's occurring now, I think we would be on our way to some successful dialogue and outcomes for everybody involved. But I think it really is a situation where I feel that employers shouldn't just look within Indeed and within their own HR processes. Reach out to our service providers and encourage newcomers to be connected outside of their network with us as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, Van. That was awesome. Both of those from you and Charlene. I want to open it up if there are any questions of either of you at this point. But, you know, it almost kind of strikes me in listening to this whole process from Wendy all the way through Charlene and then you, Van, as well. It almost seems to me as a non-professional bystander watching that immigrants to some degree are sold a bill of goods. So you meet all of this criteria, you tick off the boxes. I got all these points. Canadian immigration says, yeah, you're welcome to come to Canada. And then you land here and you find out, oh, geez, my engineering degree was great wherever I was, but it's not great here. And now I got to figure out and navigate through this. And I need some support help because, you know, I thought I was going to come over here, walk off the plane, and there'd be manufacturers there with their arms open saying, come and work for me, when that's not possible to do. So I guess being a very simple-minded individual, I draw the line straight directly to the government and saying they're not doing their job completely if they're actually designing or promoting an employment or economic immigration policy. Then they need to have all of the aspects surrounding it so that the immigrants that are coming here are not just prepared for what they have to do, but are prepared for what we need them to do. And that means engaged in employment. That's, you know, the opportunities are there. I think there's a lot of work that probably Wendy and I can work on with this, but it always causes me some, big concern when I hear that there are all of these challenges for professionals, especially professionals, coming into the Canadian culture and finding out that, maybe the bureaucratic regimen and policy and legislation behind everything makes us sound kind of unfriendly to some degree as a country to immigrate to. But the nice thing is, for our perspective, you don't find that out until you actually get here. So you don't find out beforehand, you find out when you get here. I think we need to figure out a way to encourage the government to do a better job in informing those people interested in coming here.
I would agree with that. I think there's disconnects, there's these silos that are happening, right? And we're not understanding how the silos need to operate together. Immigration needs to be connected to EO, like Employment Ontario, that Van's talking about, like you need to understand what's happening on the ground. What are employer demands? What are these pieces? And then, then how does that connect to the colleges and universities they're letting in the international students? And how does that connect to economic development, job creation, and trade? Like there's all these little things that need to start talking to each other so that we can create a really great process. Whether if we can't change the federal government's mind, at least we can change the Ontario government's mind and their approach on this, so that all these pieces are interacting together instead of being like so siloed at this point. And I think that's where the challenge for the newcomer comes in is, this group's not talking to this group's not talking to this group. And so we kind of get frustrated because we're trying to move something forward and then we got to re-engage all the groups. So I think would you agree with me on that, Van, kind of?
Yeah, I really do. And I think that I'm sort of solidifying that piece that you're just mentioning now. When you have an abundance of employers and you have an abundance of people that are really trying to be connected, and to see that at maybe a snail's pace, or to see it at a pace that really isn't in line to what the needs are within the labor market, that does invite conversation. That does invite conversation with action. And the more that you can develop that process, I think the more effective we're going to be in the region. It's just something where you listen to it and you hear it from the employer lens. Yet when you go back and speak to newcomers, it just doesn't mesh. It doesn't fit the piece that you're hearing. And that's the part where you're right. When it comes from a federal level or provincial level, how do we minimize the disconnect? And how do we get to that point where, hey, we are locally here to help. Mm-hmm. But for me, the most poignant moment at any time is when an employer says, I had no idea you're here. I had no idea that you provided these supports. I had no idea that you can really assist us not only with employment, but the other aspects to really allow this to come to fruition. I just feel that that marketing level of necessity and need has to be there on a daily basis, because we are here and we're beyond willing to help.
Yeah, and I think we need government to act or respond as quickly as business needs them to respond. It's a real problem and a real struggle when a business wants to grow. And we're coming out of a pandemic where, the economy stalled, but didn't stall because there wasn't consumer demand, stalled because of health protection mechanisms that were implemented. So we know that there's going to be a lot of catch-up economic activity going forward. That's going to position businesses that need people. And we're not going to have the people because it takes so long. There's a I don't know whether you've had a chance to read it, but there's a very sad story in the Q&A, about an individual who is trying to renew a work permit. And it recalled something that's happening right now that I got involved with just, on November 22nd, an individual received a letter that said, based on your, from immigration, based on your application and accompanying documentation that you have provided, I've carefully considered all the information. I'm not satisfied that you meet the requirements of Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and regulations. Your application as requested is therefore refused, and your status in Canada is valid until December 4th, 2021. That arrived to them on November 22nd. And this is the most unbelievable statement. It has been determined that you are not a person whose employment will create or maintain significant employment. This is a family doctor, been practicing for 14 years, has a patient roster of 1,500. And that was the letter that Immigration Canada sent to her in November. You know, like the reality of it is there needs to be, you know, we need to get the tuning fork out and make sure that government is acting on the best interest of not just people, but the community and businesses at the same time. And there is in spite of the fact you can talk to many politicians, they say, no, oh, they're just little tweaks we have to do. No, I think most people involved would say the immigration system is really broken and needs a whole lot of repairs, comfort, love, and compassion wrapped around it to make sure that we can achieve the objectives of what immigration is supposed to do.
I would agree 100% on that. Yeah, like to get that letter and to find out 2 weeks later you have to be gone, like that's absolutely ridiculous. And then that you've been a contributor to the community. And I think this is where not just the chamber, but other organizations say, look, we're building communities here, and these are our community members. These are, you know, you said she's a doctor, 1,500 patients. You know, those are the sorts of things. Or that, you know, carpenter who has built a community. You know, these are people who are integrated in our communities, our organizations. They're Canadians. They're from Cambridge. They're reacting to that. And I think you're right. There is compassion that has to be built in. There has to be rules, and we get that. But I don't understand how, you know, what evidence was even looked at on that front to determine that sort of upstanding community member isn't a fit. When I think if you speak to most Canadians, they would say, yes, they are. You speak to the data, and the data would say, yes, they are. So, and those are the sorts of pieces where those of us on the ground aren't exactly sure what's happening.
Yeah, I think you know, we have one of the individuals that's on listening in is Peter Voss. He's president and CEO of Shimco. And the only reason that I point him out and say his name is he's also a board member of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. So he's one of my important partners in this whole thing as well. But, you know, he operates a company, Shimco, that's, you know, very high tech. You know, he's in the aerospace industry, and he clearly recognizes that there is, you know, significant challenges at, you know, bringing the brain power from another country to here and making sure that the understanding is here on what has to be done from a work perspective or a professional designation perspective. But, you know, engaging partners like that, like the Peter Voss of the world, and other businesses that are looking for engineers or fabricators or machinists or, you know, tool makers, whatever the case may be, connecting them with the immigration system and the people and the inflow of people, and saying, yeah, I recognize that this individual needs to get some upgraded training, but there's no reason why they can't come and work for me and get their upgraded training along the way. We can work together to make sure that all of that happens, because that's the desperation of employers today. Employers are saying, I need, you know, I have a manufacturer. I'll give you, this is a beauty, Charlene. You're going to love this one. Manufacturer in town who, and I went around, you know, pre-pandemic, I went around, I spoke to 200 SMEs in our community, all industrial and manufacturing type of businesses. And I, you know, member or non-member, didn't really matter. I went in, made appointments and sat down with them in their offices, had a tour of their plant. And without exception, every one of them, when I sat down and said, what's your number one problem? They all said, hiring skilled people. Can't hire skilled people. And, you know, and that was pre-pandemic. So, you know, at this point now, we've got this one of our members who I had a great conversation with. he actually said to me, Greg, can you connect me with the high schools? Because I know half the kids that graduate from high school every year don't go on to post-secondary education. They're floundering. They don't know what they can do in life. I'll take them and I will work with them and I will pay for their apprenticeship to become a tool or a machine operator. I'll do that. I'll pay that out of my pocket and make sure that they're taken care of through that, because that's how desperate he is to make sure that his business is ready to grow and grow hard out of certainly out of this pandemic. So, and I don't think there's a business you can talk to that wouldn't be in the same boat as that, as saying, absolutely, like, you know, I want to upgrade. Businesses and entrepreneurs today are more caring about their workforce than they ever have been. We all know that, you know, and whether they're an immigrant or whether they're not. So, you know, I think there's no question about it. There needs to be some really fine connection between government, business, and those of us on the ground trying to deal with these challenges every day to make sure that we have a clear path of communication and that the government gets it and the government is nimble enough to make adjustments so that we can address the needs of our economy. Otherwise, I'm really fearful of what tax levels we'll be looking at in the future. If we can't pay down our debt with growth, we're going to be in big trouble.
And I think the other piece we have to remember is all of those government organizations are also desperately looking for people, which is not helping any of the backlog, right? I know a couple of people who right now are working in different levels of government, and the amount of work that they are undertaking themselves because they can't find people even to work in government, which, let's be honest, many of us thought was a really great job, was a really great career path. So there's just, it's just the service can't happen where we want to happen because we don't have the people, but we need the people because we need the people on the ground, and we need to do a lot of different things. So it can become this vicious cycle. We have to figure out how to take one part of the cycle and shift it so we can enter something new. And I'm hearing the same. Every industry is the same, and I don't know if it's, you know, how do we market better? We're working with Nora over at Immigration Partnership on some immigration research, kind of thinking about how do we strategize our attraction, and not just Waterloo region, but like how do we partner with Wealth next door, you know, like, and say, hey, you guys need what we need. Let's become a bigger attraction point. How do we leverage our dollars? How do we move forward?
Yeah, I think that hub concept again, just expand and stay connected and have that constant and consistent communication that I think is just imperative. You know, again, even when you get to that sense of we have opportunities, where is everybody? I think that really is something that you have to dig into. You really do, because it's just such a disconnect. And when it doesn't make sense within the community, it does leave you thinking, where do we move next? Crucial piece.
Yeah, I think the chamber network is a really good example of how communication works. You know, we're very nimble.
Correct.
We can connect instantaneously, and by this afternoon, we can be on a horse gallivanting up to Queen's Park or wherever, all united. And I think, you know, we're all in this. And this is really an important thing. What shocks me is, you know, things like you brought up about, you know, you need a driver's license. And today, because of the pandemic, you know, we had all the delays. You can't, you know, I don't know what people are going to do in a year's time when the government said, well, you got to have your renewals or you got to have your driver's test all done by you know, the end of 2022. Well, they're not going to be able to fill that void. There's hundreds of thousands of people that need their services. But, you know, it almost, to me, and Charlene or Van, I don't care who replies to this, but
I'll go Carolyn.
We gotta figure, like, you gotta be able to take something as mundane as that and fix it with the snap of a finger. I would think that. Like, I can tell you, my members, if I had something like that and I said, well, you know, I'm sorry, I can't stamp your documents that you want to ship and export products to overseas because, you know, I just don't have enough time to do that. They'd say, find the time. And, you know, I think, you know, government, and I understand what you're saying, Charlene, about them having difficulty finding people, then find a new way. How can we use technology to bring that down? Because for somebody to get off an airplane and say, oh, there's a job. The job's right over there with the paycheck sitting on the seat of the truck, but you got to get a driver's license before you can do that. And by the way, likely not going to happen for another year. You know what? That's insanity. That's insanity.
I don't know if you're alluding to the fact then, Greg, when like how quickly is the pivot? How quickly do you pivot and adjust what is happening? And if that's a slow process, if that's, resembling a very long inundated journey, that's not the reaction that the labor market wants. And so the example that we could probably use most recently in the last 20 months is that we went from in-person services, and we realized once the pandemic hit and everything was shut down, we could not just sit there and not offer something virtually. So the ability to pivot quickly and make those adjustments is probably the hindrance sometimes of how to progress forward, but how quickly can we adjust and move to accomplishing a solution to this? Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah, we did more programming and since the pandemic, because we can utilize technology, than we did in person, before. And now, this is obviously our friend. We're not giving this up, but we're not going to give up on it in person either, but we're not giving this up. And so, I think you're right. But that learning problem and the gears need to turn a little bit quicker, and we can help make that happen. Well, I'm not putting it all on government and saying, oh, it's your problem, figure it out, make the gears go faster and make the changes. We're here to help them, not to hinder them. We're here to make the process easier for them to deal with, but also and treat people with a little bit of dignity. I think that personally, I think it's a terrible thing when we invite someone and we welcome them to our country and we say, come to the land of opportunity. You're going to love it here. You're going to raise a family. We're a wonderful country, but it's going to take you 5 years of living in poverty before you're going to be able to utilize the skills that you have. Terrible welcome to our country. We're not like that. Canadians are much, much better.
And any employer who told an employee that would find that employee turned around and walked away, right? So, or that employer would sit there and go, wow, why am I wasting my paycheck? Yeah. So I don't understand how we can see that business perspective, but we can't move it up and say, we're going to lose that person.
That's a beauty example, Charlie. That's like advertising. We have $100,000 job here at the chamber, but for the first 5 years, you got to work for $8,000, and then we'll see where it goes. Good luck. We might not need you at the end, so don't know. I think it's just terrible, and we can be certainly better at it. So, is there any final comments that you want to make, or even Wendy? She's still here. If she wanted to make some final comments, that's wonderful.
No, I think it's been terrific and really great to see so much alignment, because I do spend, I confess, most of my time in downtown Toronto, and it's just so clear that the issues here are not that different than the issues there. And Greg, I really appreciate your leadership on this, because it's something we're passionate about. But it's going to require the voices of small businesses coming together. And I love your idea of pulling in, Perrin Beatty and others who are also committed on this. So let's make that a top priority.
You betcha. You betcha. Thank you to all three of you. You've made this day very productive from my perspective, and we'll go lockstep together. We'll change the world right here from Cambridge, Ontario. So thank you very much, folks. Ladies and gentlemen who attended today, thank you very much. I just want to remind you of a few upcoming events. And by the way, the events that I'm going to tell you about right now are all free. The Business Growth Series, sponsored by MNP, insights on how to transform relationships with clients that lead to higher sales and profits. That's December 2nd, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Good morning breakfast conversation with the mayor of the city of Cambridge, Catherine McGarry, and the mayor of the city of St. Catharines, Mayor Walter Sedsnick. And Walter is the former me in St. Catharines. So it'll be fun to have him on. And that's scheduled for December 9th. from 9:30 in the morning to 10:30 and sponsored by Graham Matthew and TD Bank. And that's free again. And here's the most exciting announcement that I've ever been able to make on any of our virtual programming for the last 20 months. Business After Hours will be in person in December. However, it's limited. So don't wait, register now for Monday, December the 13th, 5 to 6:30 p.m. in person at Four Fathers Brewing. So register for all of our events because they're all free at cambridgechamber.com. And if you have any questions, reach out to Caitlin, who is the wonderful production assistant here that I have. Thank you very much, Caitlin. And she is at caitlin@cambridgechamber.com. And that's Caitlin with a K. Thanks very much, folks. Have a wonderful day.